Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Monday, September 29th. Purpose for this sort of live podcast on YouTube is to go over the meeting agenda from September 23rd, alert everyone to the special meeting approval for for tomorrow, Tuesday, September 30th, to discuss utility rates. And I'll sort of jump in. And sorry for the delay. It's busy weeks, band, work, everything. So let's dive in and kind of go through the agenda. So we had a meeting last Tuesday, September 23rd, and I'm looking at the agenda that I posted on my campaign page or my council page. We went through the approval of the consent agenda for the minutes for the departments and committees for the city. Approved purchase orders to the tune of $603,342.02. There were no board appointments. We did approve the financial statements for August. Some notes that I sort of had in relation to that was that the overall loss, we've had several months of loss. We've all known that. But it was $15,585 for the month of August. Year to date, $134,000 year to date in loss against the budget. I know Joe, as a city manager, has been working on reductions in costs across various departments. That's not news, but definitely August was a better month for us in the overall portion of that. Had over $766,000 in expense for general government, $751,000 in revenue. Like 708 was sales tax. And so we're seeing that kind of come up by a certain percentage, like 3%, but we're off year to date by about 11% relevant to expense. Cost of goods, we all kind of know that at this point. But that was approved. There wasn't anything really extraordinary beyond that. We dove into a couple of notice of appeals from beautification actions. And I will say, greatly appreciate the Beautification Committee and all of its members and the work that they do. And usually by the time that things get to us, things have been going on for a while. So if we're talking about demolition or an action on a certain property, it's related to usually months, if not really years, of work on the beautification committee's part, with notices and a back and forth, there before it ever gets to us for the final decision. So there were two notice of appeals on properties. One was at 314, 316, and 318 South Florence. The owner of that property came in to give his public comment in regards to that, and that was certainly heard by the council, as well as the associated notes. And again, the notes for each of these properties is usually extensive. There's boxes of them and things that go back and forth in notifications and discussion between the owner's property and the beautification committee, which acts on behalf of the city. After hearing all of those things, the city council voted to approve, to move forward with the next possible actions, for that property. And so another appeal was heard in regards to a property located at 100 Arrowhead Drive, Building 500. This is something that's been going on for, since like 1999, back and forth, different owners. There was a fire there that happened, a couple of decades ago, and nobody's inhabited that building structure for quite a long time. And so in that way, beautification, it was recommending demolition. The owner's management company, which was sort of new, came in. There has been some evidence of good work between that management group and the beautification committee. There's a lot of discussion that occurred. There were beautification members that were there. There was an open discussion within the meeting itself in regards to what was sort of needed. And I think that, over almost 26 years of back and forth is pretty excessive, I would say. However, what we have sort of decided to do as a council was to give a 30 and 60 day sort of stay, if you will. We need that property, and the contractor for the building apartment complex was there, as well as a manager. And so basically decided hey, the council pursued a motion to allow 30 days to get the property in the dry, or get the project started, right? And 60 days for it to be in the dry, completely done, all work, meaning that It's completely sealed up in that regard on the external structures. And getting it to a point of beautification would allow them to continue to do their work. If they do not meet those things, the building will be demolished. And that was made very clear from the council's point of view. And I'm real big into expectation and standard, and I made sure the manager understood that through our commentary. That over 20 years of back and forth, regardless of who owns it and who is managing it, is just too long. And beautification has to do the things it has to do relevant to the safety of the public and community. So that was sort of addressed from beautification's point of view, and we approved that. Next item was approval of some stucco repair following storm damage that was based on an OMAG insurance claim to $10,000 to $12,000, and that was approved. Consideration of a harm reduction station and coordination and partnership with the Chickasaw Nation. Chickasaw Nation would like to place, and they're almost like a blessing box, if you will, think of it that way. And they're structured in a way that if there were any drug overdoses, there are things like Narcan and other things that are contained within these boxes. Some other things that would allow someone maybe coming off drugs or trying to do some other things to help assist them with like personal hygiene items and some of those things. And so the board heard that. The police chief, Don May, had presented that information, and we're looking at maybe one box, the location to be determined in regard to that. He had kind of proposed an area, and we'll see where that kind of goes. I think it was underneath the water tower downtown. There's a certain level of privacy. It's near the PD. It's away from public, if you will, to some reasonable degree. And so, but still accessible. And so if it helps reduce harm for individuals and promotes more drug-free lifestyles, I think the city is certainly for that. And so that was approved. Additionally, there was an approval, and for the next two items, they were rec center items. And I think it's important to note when we talk about these things that when the Donald Reynolds Center was put together, a big part of that was that we had to have a special restricted fund that is funded by sales tax dollars. So a certain percentage, like a 1 cent sales tax flows over, or a half-cent sales tax flows over. To fund this, it's to the tune of like $6,700 a month, give or take on average. And so as that money goes in there, it can only be used on recreation building or the rec center things. Right, it can't be moved to general government, can't be used for water plant, can't be used for anything else. It has a very specific, restricted, limited use, and so that balance in the account builds up. And so the amount that we're talking about for these things are from the restricted fund, and those monies have to be spent. They can't just accumulate, and they should be spent on things to improve the facility. So there was a consideration of window tint for the facility, the rec center, to the tune of $9,023. If you go in there early or late, there are light issues that affects the staff at the front desk, makes it difficult for them to see who's coming in, who's exiting at times, can become a little bit of a safety issue, seeing things coming in or exiting. And so, and it also would also help lower costs relevant to heating or cooling, I should say. And so from that perspective, it was approved, attempts at multiple bids, and that's where we came in at. So that was approved for that work to be done. And then also camera systems, United Systems, to the tune of $28,595.69 at the rec center on the exterior. We already have cameras on the interior. Now we have cameras that we're going to put on the exterior. There were previously, but they had become non-functional. And so, and this was also presented via Mike, Ari, as well as Don May in regards to the movement toward the camera system will be able to be monitored via the internal staff there, but also through the PD. And so this system that we're talking about is a really great system, allows for face recognition in the future at some point. There's going to be expansion, I hope, and Don sort of indicated this is a possibility of that system throughout town to some reasonable degree as allowed by law, to help law enforcement with regards to if they hear about an issue in a certain area, they can kind of pull up the camera in a certain area and see what they see. And so from that perspective, there's some of those things that are going to come in the future. But this is just for the immediacy of the rec center along the exterior, and we had that discussion, and that was approved. And again, it's from special restricted funds that are associated with the rec center alone that have to be spent only on the rec center. So those two things were approved. There was no executive session. Under city manager comments, and I'll do a separate video for this because it's going to tie into the meeting we're going to have tomorrow, is that we will have a special meeting tomorrow, September 30th. And he sort of mentioned this in a few of the previous meetings that this was coming. Everyone's known that water utility rates have been under review for a while, but I'll do a separate video on that just because of the importance of that to kind of really line things out. But basically, that we had approval for a special meeting for tomorrow, September 30th. At 6 p.m. at City Hall, open to the public, where we're going to discuss city utility rates. And so I know that'll be a hot button topic. Again, I'll do a separate post on that to kind of break that down. And that was really all that we had for that as we moved into, and he did mention, and this is worth mentioning, our city of Pauls Valley, Herschel Dobbins, 45 years of work with the city, is retiring. He is having his retirement party tomorrow from 1 to 3 at City Hall. So if you want to come say hey to him, 45 years of work in any endeavor is amazing at one place. And to do it for the city of Pauls Valley, I know that he's been a really integral portion of the workforce here and very knowledgeable, and he'll certainly be missed. But I'm happy retirement to him, and his retirement party will be tomorrow at City Hall, September 30th from 1 to 3. So we have that going on. We closed the general government meeting, moved into PVMA, went through the consent agenda. Let me go back to that. Pull this up. Approved the consent agenda for it, which included previous PVMA minutes as well as Lake and Board, sanitation report, Pauls Valley sanitation report, activity report. Approved purchase orders to the tune of $520,000. Approved financial statements for August of 2025 for PVMA. One thing worth noting that I had sort of noted was that we had spent $270,000 on the water plant as of August 31st, 2025. I thought that was worth noting. We did have a decent revenue bump, above the $540,000 expense that was spent for the month. Sometimes those things are deceptive depending on when things are paid, so you really have to look at the year to date. However, I did talk to Joe about it, and this was during the meeting, about how those monies are sort of, kept in long-term reserve, particularly to make sure that any overages that we have that are above baseline for, PVMA, stay in PVMA, and that was sort of discussed and done. And so from that perspective, we approved the financials with that discussion. And we'll get into some of the rate study stuff in a separate video. And there really wasn't anything else that went on outside of that. We already mentioned the meeting that was going to come up tomorrow evening. Folks can certainly come out to that. And I will shut down this YouTube podcast live, and I will do a separate video in regards to utility rates, water plant, wastewater, sanitation next. So I will hope to see you guys tomorrow at the meeting. September 30th, Tuesday, 6 p.m. City Hall. Open meeting. We'll see you then. Later.